you want to take a great portrait, you have to fall a little bit in love with the person. You have to fall, and it's so completely true. Now, the last time I looked, a fucking chocolate fountain isn't falling in love with anyone.
The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will.
Welcome to Perspective, a podcast for wedding craves, where we sit down often with a special guest and talk about our many years of experience in the wedding industry so that you can learn from us and grow your own wedding business. Do you ever find yourself at a wedding looking down at your camera, panicking about your settings? Or during a couple session and just not feeling the flow? Or in doubt while editing, feeling you should have used the 35 rather than the 50mm? Maybe you have a digital mindset. Well, today's guest might be able to help you. Cinemate is a Rangefinder NYC awarded photographer with a decade's worth of experience traversing the globe shooting couples in love, but with a passion for analog photography, and who is a supporter of the philosophies behind shooting in older formats. So let's recalibrate our minds with Cy and get back to our analog state. Cy is also a serial entrepreneur with an array of different businesses under his wing. So we'll be chatting about his business mindset, as well as why it's important to make fans rather than clients. This episode is, of course, sponsored by With Jack, and for a limited time by beans.ie. So Greg, where the hell's my coffee?
You're not getting a coffee. It is far too late at night.
Bastard.
You didn't sleep last week, so you're not getting a coffee.
That is absolutely right. If you guys tuned in for Jai Long's episode, Greg and I were drinking coffees at 10 o'clock at night, and, we thought that was a good idea.
And because we're talking to the other side of the world again, being New Zealand tonight, it's similar time of night for us. So
we've learned our lesson. We're not doing it.
It hurts us to say that we're not drinking coffee.
Yes, but as photographers and filmmakers and business owners, we know the power of stories, and beans.ie do too. Beans.ie started because they knew there were so many stories about the world of coffee, and not just about the regions or varieties, but about the people behind the beans, the roasters, and us, the drinkers. This is the most flexible coffee subscription that we've ever used, showcasing some of the top roasters around the world who bring something different to the table. You've been listening to Greg and I talk for years about what we've been drinking at our podcast table, but now you can join us. Curate your own monthly subscription from an ever-changing list of beautiful coffees, and because you are our best friends, we've hooked you up with an awesome promotion. Use promo code PERSPECTIVE15 to get 15% off your first order. That is Perspective15 to get 15% off your first order for Coffees with Stories, and straight to your door. And boy, do I wish I was drinking a coffee right now. However, Cy, hi, thank you for joining us. What are you drinking?
Oh, that is unacceptable. I can absolutely get you through this with my energy. I'm on my third mug. It's 11 a.m. here.
Oh.
My third very large mug of filter.
Brilliant.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, you're making up for the lack of our coffee then.
Exactly.
I'm gutted that I'm not having a coffee, but we have to.
I'm currently drinking a very nice Guji. Quite good, actually. Actually, quite good. I've been quite pleased with yesterday and today's brew. Hang on, let me just take a sip.
And how are you brewing it?
Well, this is a good question. If we're going to go deep on this, I can go deep.
Let's go deep.
I have for a long time been in the Chemex game, but pause, hold caller. Over the summer, which summer, your winter, our summer, I did a little bit of a camping mission. Roamed around the nation. Actually, just roamed around a beach, to be honest. And I was using a gold filter, the little gold filter thing. What's that thing called?
An AeroPress. No.
Nah, that's rubbish.
That's rubbish. A gold thing.
No, the little gold, whatever the thing is, the Swiss gold. Yeah, Swiss gold. And I was like, whoa, this is like, because Chemex is super clean, really clean. I think maybe too clean. Like you just like, where'd the coffee go? But it is the Chemex filter is great for if you're deep frying at home for filtering your oil. I find quite good, maybe not for making coffee. Anyway, so moved over to Swiss Gold, which just lets everything through, and I was like, look at what I've been missing out on. Holy shit, this tastes like coffee. So coming back from that holiday, I've moved deep to the V60 filter game. Which is kind of like halfway in between, and I'm finding I'm getting a good balance of clean acidity in cup with a delicious amount of body and just enough oil to satisfy my needs.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna have to check out this Swiss Gold.
Yeah,
I've not heard of that one. And I thought I knew a lot of coffee.
When you talk about coffee like that, you hear your voice and you just think, "Who's that wanker?" But
that is so true. Yeah,
you're in good company here, though.
Yeah, it's like if I heard someone talking about wine, like I just talked about that coffee, I'd be like, "You can piss off, mate." But actually, it turns out that somehow I've gone down the rabbit hole. And I mean, listen, if you know what you like, if you like what you like, you like what you like, right? And if you don't, then you don't. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So
by the way, Googe for me, a good like. We've got a bunch of friends in the coffee game. A really dear mate of mine was the CEO of a big coffee company here for like years, and so I've always had access to behind the curtain of the process.
Ooh, all right.
Had some quite nice coffees show up, but I must admit, just your straight up basic, Ethiopian. Also, I've been introduced recently to the term masel, obviously in meters above sea level. Like when you go into like a new coffee place. And the dude will ask, whoever's behind the counter, will ask you like, hey, what do you like? Trying to figure out what you want, and you just go straight to the thing. You're like, well, I prefer a masel above 1,500 meters.
Okay.
So it gets a bit wanky. Also, I don't even know what that means. But dropping it in straight away is just like a fucking mic drop where it's just like, back off. I need some time to look at my own thing, right?
Oh, damn. Coffee prestige to the max.
Or coffee wankery. I don't know. Try it out sometime though. Next time you go into a place that's like, like coffee intimidating, where like it's pretty intimidating. And you're just like, I shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. Just drop, if you're feeling a little bit like you're a shrinking violet, just drop masel, meters above sea level. Just drop that into the sentence when you're ordering. And suddenly you'll hear everything go silent. Yeah. And people will look, who's referencing masel over there?
Oh, beautiful. Tips for life right here. Tips for life.
I don't know. Tips to get you branded a wanker and kicked out of a cafe. That's more what they are. But
oh man. Well, we actually have. I mean, I've skipped the ad read live, but I'll put it in the podcast after. But we are obviously sponsored by a coffee subscription company that ships kind of coffees from all over the world. Do you have any coffees that you'd recommend? Because we're in quite close contact with the guy who runs it, and he's always asking us, if you hear of any coffees, let me know, and I can try and get them shipped over and spread across the world. So, you have any good recommendations?
I mean, from roasters, like there's some we're good. I mean, there's some pretty great roasters in New Zealand. But then when I say pretty great roasters, like I'm going to be honest here, like you're taking a bean and you're cooking it, right? So like how great do you have to be? But yes, obviously great. You have to be great. But also I'm always just amazed by this situation. So there's some people, like the family running a co-op in the highlands of Ethiopia, and like someone goes there and like they do a blind tasting with the half a dozen like coffee buyers, and then they like say, yeah, I'll take all you got of that, or I'll take a 40-foot container of that, send us the green beans, right? They ship them down in trucks to put them into like a 40-foot container at the port wherever in Addis or something. Mm-hmm. Goes on a container ship, goes halfway around the world, comes to New Zealand. They ship them to another part of the country. They go into a warehouse. They wait around. A dude cooks them, basically, fries them up, sweet, mean, grinds them up, maybe not, maybe just leaves them as a whole bean, seals it in a thing, like ships it to me, right, in Auckland from another city, and then often I'll then send it to my friends in, say, the UK or like the US to be like, and they're like, hey, send me a bag of that sweet coffee you drink. I'm like, holy shit, this bean has been, like, it's ridiculous. It's just out of control. And then what they do is they just grind it up into a powder, pour hot water over it, and depending on the day, it's probably not very good. Or depending on the day, it's actually amazing. It could actually be amazing. There's some pretty good roasters in New Zealand. Rocket is a big fave. Supreme, my personal fave. They've sort of grown into a juggernaut. But yeah, like they it's always that thing too that like everyone just is kind of selling the same coffees around the world because they're the ones that can get volume of. And then every now and then these little crazy ones show up. That's like, it's like the inside word. But sometimes they're so kind of like niche in what they taste like that you've kind of got to be pretty niche to be like, like there's, I've gone to some crazy cuppings and tastings and stuff with some intimidating people where you're tasting a thing and you're thinking in your head, you're going around a table sipping from a spoon. In your head, you're thinking like, God, this is shit. Like, is this, I'm going to have to go home and I'm glad I made a coffee before I came to this thing, and I'm going to have to go home and make one afterwards too, because this is like what is. Everyone else who's like got very refined palates and who's deep in the industry is just like, whoa, yeah, like, whoa, yeah, whoa, yeah. I'm like, no, not quite getting it.
Yeah,
but I don't even know what I just said. Hopefully that was a good ad hopefully that was a good ad read for beans.ie because like,
well, it's not live, so if I muck it up I can just re-record it. It's absolutely fine. But look,
I would definitely recommend the summer blend, which is cotton candy, strawberry, blueberry and vanilla wafers. Who writes these tasting notes on beans.ie website, right? Great bubble gum, cola and vanilla wafer. Vanilla wafer shows up quite a bit.
Okay.
Can I say there is a description here that has vanilla wafers in the summer blend, but in the single origin Kochiri, it's a single wafer, vanilla wafer, just one, just a touch, not a packet,
just a hint,
guys, just a hint, just a broken wafer, just a crumb of a wafer, just a hint of a smell of a wafer from the empty packet of vanilla wafer. I don't even know what a vanilla wafer is.
Oh. I think we're gonna have to.
I'm on the third mug, guys.
Oh, but I think we're gonna have to move away from the coffee. Step away from the coffee. Like Simon, I'm super excited to have you on. To be honest, I've been a big fan of your work for a while. But last month, when you messaged us to say you were ready at your podcast desk, and I was like, "Wait, what? Are we a month early? What's going on? Oh no, I've done it again. I've misread some dates or something. You got me panicked."
No, I got me panicked too. So I was just like, "Whoa!" And then when your reply in true Scottish fashion was just like, "I mean, I know there's a time difference, but I don't think there's a month time difference." I was like, "Whoa."
Yeah, I wasn't sure. There was like a confusion, and I was like, Does he think it's March already? And I thought I'm gonna have to put it in some sort of jokey form. And try and make it clear that it's not March.
It's like, dude, it is not March where you are. And I was like, thank goodness. And then I was just driving back from a shoot, been away on a shoot, driving back into Auckland, and then brutal traffic. And then I'm basically like, my phone's kind of doing your GPS situation at the same time. And then I'm trying to figure out like, so what, hang on. Well, as you see that the time you thought you had, 2 hours up your sleeve, in an hour, then you're going to be arriving and it's like, whoa, trying to figure out, download, like, what do I need to do? How does this work? All while driving, navigating traffic. It was quite late,
Yeah.
Anyway.
We got here in the end.
Yes, exactly.
Bloody hell, we got here.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like, so you've kind of been on my list of guests to get on for a while. And I have to admit this, right? The first time I wrote to you, I was in my hot tub and I was in kind of like a drunken haze. Like I was just having a little bit of downtime, a couple of cans, because, it's totally professional of me to message podcast guests when I'm inebriated, but hell.
It's the only acceptable way.
Well, so this led me to do two things. One, I had just got my film camera, so I was watching anything, film, anything I could get my hands on, whether it was YouTube content or whatever it was. But that led me on to your work because your name had always been on that list, and I really got into your work, and I was like, yeah, this is a good idea to message him right now.
Yeah.
And
Always a good idea. In the hot, I'm going to need a description of the hot tub too. Like, what I want to imagine that you are in in a Swedish forest, like with mist and like I don't know, gear falcons flying around you, and kind of some sort of cedar-lined thing as you're lazing, like having your cans brought to you by.
He's gonna kill that dream because it's an inflatable hot tub in the suburbs of Glasgow.
Yep. Yeah. To be fair though, like throughout the day, I had been getting my children to bring me cans of beer, so that's kind of close.
Yeah.
That makes me sound like an awful father. I should not say this on the podcast.
Oh no, learning to fend for yourself as a child is part of the growing up phase, and part of that is learning where the cans of things are kept. And so you bring the can to the father while learning, that's where the beer is, and then you have to undo that knowledge in about 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So
good luck with that.
The recommendation of getting you on the podcast originally came from Cole Roberts, a guest ages ago in the podcast.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
A very manly Canadian man, a very sexy man with a great voice.
He does have a great voice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I remember him saying something about just get Si on, point him in the direction, and just let him run. And I can see what he means by that already. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's just like give me a word, and then you'll end up with like about 300 like controversial statements that mean not anything. Hey, tell me about you got your first film camera. What did you get? Tell me about. Tell me more. I need to know. Back to the hot tub.
Oh man, it was a Nikon F1. In fact, no, it wasn't. It was a Nikon F3. That was the one.
Yeah, I was going to say more classic case.
Yeah. That was the kind of first one I'd got, and I got it second hand, and it stunk of smoke, and it came with a 50mm lens, I believe. But you know what? I really loved getting into it. I really did. And obviously, we're just filmmakers, so we don't make money with photography at all. But man, I just even stripping it back to black and white, it's just. There's something about it, and I enjoy, so when I was in the hot tub, I was actually ordering chemicals as well. I was like, oh, cool, these, I was buying all the kind of the kit to do it in your house. So yeah, I was having a great time, and I have been. It's good. It's good.
Good time. It's a good time.
It is a good time.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. If you go, I'm just realized I'm busting in on what you guys probably have 20 ways of doing this, and I was about to just go off on a tangent. No, I'll be silent. Tell me, guide me.
I was just gonna say before we went off on the film tangent, which I will love and continue. Just it's like a Q&A reminder. If you guys are listening on Clubhouse, that is awesome. There will be a Q&A section at the end, so you can ask Simon anything you want. And if you want to support us on Patreon, you can listen back to that Q&A section later. But shall we move on, Greg?
Yes.
Just move on.
Move on.
Si, I said this earlier, but I've already pre-recorded an introduction. However, I always like to ask the guests, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm a photographer, and I make photographs. Make photographs, not take photographs. I've always been quite big on that.
Yeah.
Make photographs, not take photographs. Yeah. And I've probably spent the last longer than a decade, shooting people in love all around the planet with my brilliant partner in crime, Sophia Bailey. And we're lucky enough to have been a part of a bunch of very brilliant people's, whatever that means, people celebration of their love all over the world. And I think it's led us to wanting to make a certain kind of work that tells a certain kind of story, and kind of how that works. I think it's always been a really big distinction, and I still even, I do it every week when I meet people and ask you what you do, and they're just like, oh yeah, I tell stories of photograph people in love. And everyone's like, oh, you mean like weddings? And I'm like, no, it requires no more. It requires no more. I told you everything there is to know. It's like people in love. Because there's so much, stigma is the wrong word, but there is so, when you think of a wedding, you think of a cultural, social, document about things go a certain way in a commitment ceremony or whatever. There is so much bound up in what that word means, and it turns out that anyone who's been in the people and love game for very long will suddenly see a vast array of flavors of people and flavors of love and flavors of how that is celebrated and flavors of how that's captured. And it seems like a bit of a rip-off to try and compound that into a very loaded word like wedding, when in fact it's a fuck ton more, deeper and wider and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and take photos of people in love.
Yeah.
Say no more.
Yeah. I was intrigued to see where you were going to go with that answer, because if you take a deep dive into yourself, then you're actually more than just a photographer. You've got loads of other businesses as well. There's Story and Light workshops. There's Arcade. You're a furniture company.
The furniture game.
Tell us a bit about how some of those came to be as well.
I mean, the workshop thing, I think, we've been lucky enough to be a part of a lot of group workshops, like around the world, like that our friends and people we know have run, and you sort of get to be a part of this really a wonderfully organized thing with, like take Way Up North, like, that's something, one that I enjoy enormously, doing like Cole and Jakob's thing. Or like our good friends of ours in New York run one called Workshop, a workshop called Workshop. Who would have thought? But except, it's WIKSHP. They just got rid of the bits, the workshop or something. But you can be a part of these things. And I think I've always been really skeptical of the workshop scene in some ways as a business model, because you're always sort of like, like you'll find yourself at a workshop or at a thing somewhere, or like a Canon sponsored event at a thing, and you find yourself sitting at a table late at night with a bunch of people just saying, listen, I probably shouldn't say this, but you don't need to come to these things. Here's what you need. You need to do this, this, and this. You need to get like 5 good people around you. You need to figure out how to feed yourself. And the sooner you fucking learn to do that, the better off you'll be. And you'll find that you don't need to be spoon-fed this stuff, or you don't need, or like I've been at so many things where you'll be sitting in a corner late at night saying to someone like, how much did it cost you to come here? Like with how much did the hotel cost you? How much did the flights cost you? How much did the thing cost you? And you go, it's great. And this is a great way to find your tribe if you haven't found your tribe yet. But if you've found some people, you know what you could do? You could get 3 or 4 or 5 of your people, and you could pull that money and you could go on a fucking tour of New York, like bloody galleries for a week. Or you could fly to an ice cave in Greenland and like spend like 3 days looking at how the light comes through the mouth of the cave at whatever. Or you could figure out your own educational thing here. You could take this resource and you could do a thing with it. You could go and hunt down Gregory Cruson, or someone who's like just someone whose work you love, and just go and stalk them until they let you inside their house and make you a cup of tea and tell you all about something. I don't know. You could go and camp outside David Lynch's house, and get him to like read the weather to you like he does like occasionally. It's like there's all of these things about how learning and getting an education works, about how putting inspiration into you works, that you don't need to be spoon-fed by. Now, having said that, like all of these workshops are so fucking great. Like I have had, as even speaking at them, I've had so many benchmark experiences of just being there with the people and the people you love and getting to talk about things.
Yeah.
So what's ironic is that often at those workshops, I'm the subversive one in the corner saying, you don't need to do fucking workshops. But the fact is, the only way people can hear that message is by someone who has taken the massive risk to put on a workshop to get me there, to then for me to say you don't need to do workshops, knowing that I'll say that. So the whole thing is an irony, but it's also it's also that thing of like, I think throwing the net wider to be like, what's the thing that changes how you think about something? What's the thing that makes you, be, this is such a, this is, in some ways, this is like a horrible harks back to Sunday school kind of illustration, but it's also really valid. Like, it's like, what's the thing that makes you kind of like fertile soil that you can drop a bloody seed into and it can go, And lots of that is the experience you have around that stuff. So with the story and light stuff, I think there's a place that's in the Central Plateau in New Zealand, in the North Island of New Zealand, which is very dear to to Soph and I. Place where I go fly fishing. There's a bunch of volcanoes, like big, crazy outdoor wild weather, and there's a mental old 1950s ski lodge perched on the side of a volcano, way up a crazy road, in the middle of this alpine desert, and it's mental. And we were always just like, man, we'd love to bring. We're lucky enough to have travel around the world with all our wonderful crew of mates doing photo stuff, and speaking at things and shooting and going on weird. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm going to finish the workshop story, but then I have to tell you a story about Ollie Sanson, because holy fuck,
Okay.
what to do with that. But no, we were just like, it would be so great to be able to bring that atmosphere of what it feels like to travel with some of your friends who are, who are sharp and subversive and creative and doing wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling is what it feels like often for us to be sitting in an airport lounge with our friends talking about crazy shit, or sitting in our lounge room talking about crazy shit, or sitting on a plane somewhere, or in a weird, or you're in a green room at a convention somewhere talking about this stuff. And we're just like, man, that stuff is benchmark. The weird shit that you talk about, that's the stuff that changes you. Yeah. How can we bring that sort of conversation to a bunch of other people who are kind of, just starting out in the game? So we're like, fuck, let's see if we can convince people to come and hang out in this weird 1950s ski lodge on the side of a volcano in the middle of fucking nowhere in New Zealand. And we'll just invite a bunch of our dear friends, and we'll just do a bunch of stuff, and we'll just see how it goes. And not stuff of like, hey, here's business 101 about how to get more clients, or here's how to, here's how to design an album. Just stuff of like, what do you do when you're 5 years deep and you just think you fucking run out of gas? What do you do when all these conversations about how does it work? We just wanted people. We always were storing we want people to find their crew and just go and be like, we don't, it can be us, it might not be us, but we'll put you in the same room with some amazing people, and you'll probably discover that some of these people here are your crew, because we're sitting around late at night talking about what do you do when you feel like a failure? What do you do when you feel like your work's fucking terrible? How do you stay in this game for 10 years and feel like it's satisfying? How do you all these things which often people think, but they don't, especially if they work in their own, talk about. So yeah, that's kind of the story and light thing. And so, but the location is just as important. I remember driving after doing an airport pickup, man, we in one edition, there's a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of Australians who've flown from all around Australia and slowly gathered in airports, from, in Melbourne or Sydney or whatever. And we just keep getting these messages of the larger and larger groups of people, oh, I found these dudes who are coming to story, and then people flying into Auckland and then getting on a small plane, flying to the middle of the island, until someone sends us, I think Cassie sent us a photo of holding a phone up, looking down the aisle, on this little plane, and it's all our crew. It's whoa, we've fucking dominated. I picked everyone up and in four-wheel drives at this little airport, and then drove around the edge of a lake, and then we're basically out in the middle of nowhere, an hour's drive in, and you're four-wheel driving up this crazy volcanic ridge towards a snow-capped volcano with a ski lodge on the side of the thing. There's another volcano, the Mount Doom from the Lord of the Rings things, Ngātahui, over there in the distance. The sun's going down, the colors are insane. And it's just everyone's just and everyone has been traveling for 16 hours. And at this stage, they are an emotional overload. People are crying. It's like, whoa, where the fuck are we? Like, whoa. They come into the ski lodge. There's a roaring fire. There's like a brilliant chef who's like smashing out the stuff, and everyone's just, there's levels of reunion going on, along with levels of everyone going, what the fuck, where are we? There's snow starting to fall. It's all the things. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing where you just go, now we've got some fertile fucking ground. Now, it's like, tell me anything right now. And I'll be like, yes, sure. Like, absolutely. And you get this thing that, like, if you're an artist, if you're wired up to have a heart that's like raw and alive and wants to experience things and wants to feel things quite deeply and turn it into work, all of that stuff is the stuff that makes you go, oh, now I want to learn something. Not, like show me a PowerPoint presentation of a thing that goes whatever, and we're going to sit in a conference room or something. It's like this experience of, and you look around at these other people that you don't know, that you've had this arriving experience with, and you just go like, you're my crew. Like, holy shit, we've just experienced this thing. We're the only ones on the planet who've just experienced this last hour of glory, and you've got to be my crew, because I'm going to want to talk about this for the next 10 years. Like, we're in this together now. So, and it's all of that stuff. And you find that from that level of like walls coming down, that people just start to like share stuff and talk about stuff. And you really don't have to drop very much, insight and information into that before it turns into some remarkable conversations. Yeah. And people want to make some really great work. And so I think that's the story and light thing. That's the kind of passion which just goes, because you can sit in a New York, in a venue in New York with some amazing people talking about some pretty incredible things about business models. Mm-hmm. And like, my heart's always just like, fuck, like, if I could take you to a mountain, if we could wade through a bloody river, if we could freeze, get hypothermia and like fall through the ice into like a bloody river underneath, while we're trying to just shoot like a dear friend of ours who's like standing up against a snowstorm, and then we come back in and stand by the fire freezing cold and talk about like all the things. Like, this is, why don't we just go do that? We should do that, Yeah. Which is just, all of that stuff is just, it's really just saying, like your heart, which does the experiencing, and your head, which does the learning. Mm-hmm. You've kind of got to bring the two things together, otherwise it gets a bit dry. I don't even know what I'm saying now. Yeah. Anyway,
I just want to say, I totally get you. Like, even you telling that story gets me excited to go out and adventure. Like, it's like my heart is wanting to escape and get out and do stuff and create, and just from you telling that story. And maybe that's just a side effect of COVID, and we've all kind of, we're very jealous of your freedom over there, because you have a very sensible government who have a good approach to COVID. But over here, we've got a bunch of lunatics, and we've been kind of locked down for a while, so we have this yearning, so just hearing that story, and it reminds me, going back to your crew. I remember you talking to Jai Long, who obviously we podcasted with last week, but Jai, I think you were on his podcast, and you were talking about customer service in a way that I hadn't really heard about customer service being talked before. And like, I don't want to get into talking about customer service, because you guys have had that conversation. Hang on, I'm going to look at my notes here. Is it right? Okay, hang on. It was all right. So for the listeners out there, the podcast episode that I was listening to was episode 19 of Jai Long's Make Your Break podcast, which I mentioned a few times in the last episode because I'm a big fan of his as well. Yeah, I do want to get your thoughts on something before we go back to your other businesses, because I was at a workshop one time and I heard something that was kind of interesting, and I can kind of see where it came from, but I didn't agree. And I want to know if you agreed with this statement. So the statement was, we, as photographers and videographers, are no more important to a couple than a chocolate fountain. Which
it just depends on how important you think a chocolate fountain is. Like,
well, I suppose I didn't take it from that point of view, but
that's absolutely, like, honestly. Here, so that one. Things to know about me: one, I can develop an opinion on anything. Two, it'll probably sound like a strong opinion, but also I'm absolutely fine with like it being the only one in the room who thinks that. But like, that just fucking ridiculous. No, like, okay. I think the thing is, like, if you're a person, if you're a person who has a personality like a chocolate fountain, then yes, you are probably as important to a couple as a chocolate fountain. Although that couple could be like, for example, chocolate connoisseurs who think chocolate fountains are absolutely a fuck ton important. But the thing is, like, you should be like the person who made the chocolate fountain, who provided the chocolate fountain, who put the chocolate in the chocolate fountain, who fucking shipped that shit off and set it up, can be an absolute douchebag. And it doesn't matter because they're not there. They just let the chocolate fountain work its magic, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, but your personality, your empathy, how you understand how people work, how you understand their stories, how you know, that's you're there, and who you are is just as important as what you're doing. You know, how you relate to people is just as important as what you're doing. I was having a Zoom meeting last night with a couple, shooting in a few months, and talking. I don't know what we're talking about, but like I heard myself saying, it's just like, man, when everyone that you love and that you care about is in, which might be 200 people or it might be 3 people, it doesn't matter. But when they're in a room. And I'm actually just talking about crammed in a little room while you're doing something. It doesn't matter what the messy room is like. If everyone you love on this day that's so important to you is crammed in a room somewhere, all I know is that I need to be in that room as well, because that's where all the people are. Something's going to happen. There's a thing, a beautiful thing. This is an intersection, a Venn diagram of all the things in your life right now. And like, if I'm telling the story of this beautiful thing, I need to be in that room. So I need to do whatever it takes for me to get access to that room. You know, I need to be your best friend. I need to guide you through this process. I need to be the person that everyone in that room trusts. I need to be invisible or incredibly visible or something. Who knows? But the thing is that, like, you are fucking vital. The amount of, like, couples, the amount of, often when we shoot, Soph will shoot like the bride, the girls, and whatever they're doing at the start of the day, and I'll shoot the guys, I'll shoot the grooms. The amount of couples, especially grooms, that, like, I'm just dear friends with, like we're like fucking 500, 600 weddings deep, and I can remember almost all of them when you meet someone in the street and you sit down, you're just like, oh yeah, and they're like, how can you remember? I'm like, I don't know, but I had this crazy heart experience with you, and I lived with the images for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, it's imprinted on me. I have an empathetic heart that feels this, that sees the stuff and understands what it must like to experience it for you. But you've walked these people through this thing. Like I had a weekend off, like a couple of weeks ago, and like, for ages, like, I've been messaging. There's a groom I shot. Like, we shot like a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and he lives on a station, on a high country station, way down in the middle of nowhere, in the island. And they've got him and his wife Emma, George and Emma. They've got like a new little baby. He's surrounded by massive packs of dogs. We went down there and shot like a wedding of one of his farm workers, like, got married, and we went down there and shot the wedding on this station of, like, their farm worker, and we're hanging out, we stayed with them, and they're like, on the whole thing, and and they've just become like dear friends. And then I've got one weekend off, and George is just like, oh, come down, like, I'll take you fly fishing up this crazy, like, river over the back of the station. I was just like, okay. Just drove 8 hours down to the thing to go, and it felt as natural as anything, like, in the world, because, like, I've been alongside him on a crazy wedding day when there was like a freaking hurricane, power cuts, all sorts of crazy shit. He was like, the last thing he wanted was to be in front of a whole bunch of people. I could give you so many examples. I just got a message, like, when I'm sitting here on the laptop from a couple that we shot where, like the bride is buying, like, the groom, like, some speakers, and they were just like, hey, we were over at your place for, like, drinks, like, a couple of months ago, and we were playing records and we saw the speakers, and I'm like, buying Mike some speakers, like, what's the model of the speakers, like, can you please not tell him? And it's just like, that says everything for you about what the relationship with couples is like, because like, these people came over to our house for drinks and we're playing records, and then now we're doing speaker recommendations, and obviously you don't have that connection with every single person you shoot, and sometimes it's not possible. Also, sometimes you have that connection for a day or a week or whatever, but you don't see each other again because the couple lives in Cyprus and I live in fucking New Zealand or whatever. But I think the big thing is that like that's the level of heart engagement in the day if you want to tell the stories of people, like and I'm absolutely fine for it not to be like that for lots of people, because I know that I have an enormous heart and I have a sense of empathy for people which is very strong. But there's that Annie Leibovitz thing where she's just like, if you want to take a great portrait, you have to fall a little bit in love with the person. And it's so completely true. Now, the last time I looked, a fucking chocolate fountain isn't falling in love with anyone.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Can you believe that we landed that? We somehow landed that back to the chocolate fountain.
Honestly, you are talented, sir. Well, I did ask that question, and this is a really bad interviewing technique, right? I assumed that's what your answer was going to be, because
You assumed all of that?
I assumed all of that, and I also knew he was going to tie it back to the chocolate fountain.
On the chocolate fountain.
But like I felt that way too, and actually going back to old clients or old couples, I should say, clients. So, was it last night, Greg? Was it last night we got contacted from the 10. We shot this wedding 10 years ago, and they never bought the kind of shorter version of the film that we did for them. And we were just talking about their wedding, and it was so clear as day to me. Like 10 years ago, we were joking around in the morning. Oh, they had this sports car. Oh, yeah, remember that time you jumped in the back and you went down the motorway without a seatbelt? And I was like, oh, yeah, that was so bloody good fun. And it was like, still early days, but I remembered so many moments from that wedding. It's just like what you were saying, like building that kind of a relationship with your clients. Obviously, like you said, it doesn't happen all the time, but yeah, it's
also like that. I think the heart. I mean, we have this ridiculous, I don't know, whatever Western idea of emotion happening in the heart and thinking happening in the head. But like your emotional memory for things is very, very, very strong.
Yeah.
And linked to you just think about your olfactories, how smells bring back the thing, how the soundtrack, brings back the thing. And yet I think often in our visual storytelling we not deny some of those things, but we just kind of ignore them, and it's like if you ever think about I do a lot of long drives around the country, especially post COVID, like just not really enjoying the flying experience, dirty people, and being happy to drive. And the beauty of driving, even if you're driving 8 hours, is that you can stop and get a pie. Oh glory, a pie, whenever you want. But pies are a big thing in our country. The meat pie.
Oh, you're talking to two Scottish dudes right here.
It's classic.
Have you ever had a haggis pie? Get yourself a haggis pie, my man.
Get yourself a haggis pie.
Macaroni pie.
What is a pie if not a haggis encased in pastry? Is it not?
Yeah.
Say no more.
Exactly.
I don't even know where it's going. No. But you drive. I drive a lot, and I listen to heaps of music. And it's just like, man, sometimes I just need to, if you're driving on your own, I need to be very careful of how emotive like music is for me, because you'll find that you just suddenly go down the rabbit hole of this thing, and your heart's feeling all sorts of stuff, and you're seeing the lights a certain way and the landscape's a certain way, and you're moving and you're operating machinery and you're all these things, and so you're just like, oh mate, is it raining? Why is my face wet? It must be I'm inside a vehicle. It must be I'm leaking out of my eyes. What's happening here? And it's all of those things like that. Like music is such a powerful like thing, and so if you ask me a question about a subject after I've been listening to Megadeth versus after I've been listening to Big Thief, for example, like you're going to get two very different answers. And I think it's it's the same thing. If you ask me a question after like I've been in the kitchen like cooking onions versus after I've like just walked past someone who wore the perfume of my first girlfriend when I was like whatever, like there's two very different answers. Like your heart is operating, your emotions are operating at this level, and you forget that like as a visual artist, the same thing. You're doing the same thing, and so of course if you can remember what your first girlfriend's perfume smelled like at high school, or you can remember what it smelled like to be in your granddad's caravan on holiday somewhere while he was frying up onions or whatever. Just after you caught your first fish, to get all these things, like you remember it, like your heart remembers it, your emotions remember it immensely. Why would you not expect that you're going to have the same memory of this beautiful emotive moment that you told the story of and you shot the frame of and you curated and edited it in a way that it was all of that emotion of this once in a lifetime thing was packaged up in a 30-image blog post or whatever. Of course you're going to be able to sit down and be like, I remember, I can visualize, I can see the image, I can see the thing that I edited, I can see the thing that I shot, I can see what the light was like, I can feel it, I can sense it. Even more so potentially than the people that you shot it for, because you lived with it. Lived with it and went through that process. I don't even know what this has got anything to do with anything. What I'm saying though is that in this room, analog mindset is like a big thing, and that's a fucking analog mindset as fuck. Like you're talking about how your heart remembers things and how your heart experiences things, which is fucking analog AF.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the reason why I assumed about your answer to the chocolate fountain, because I've heard you talk about, and I don't know if you coined the phrase, the fan economy. But you've got this history with being in bands. Can you explain what a fan economy is for people who might not have heard that before?
It's the difference between, it's like what's the easiest way without me getting on a massive 3-hour rant to do this? It'll probably happen anyway. No, of course it will. The idea is like a product. Someone who just does the maths on buying a product, is, here's the thing. Think about someone. Fans are irrational. You can bank that statement. Fans are fucking irrational as. And you have a think about, everyone's a fan of something. You guys will be obsessive, ridiculous fans of a thing. And you might be the most rational, accountant-minded, careful decision-making, whatever's about, 99% of your life. But there'll be something that you are fucking nuts for, that you are irrational as fuck for. The easiest way to think about, music's a very easy way to think about it, you have to think about someone who would, their favorite band, who was the soundtrack to their summer, 10 years ago, and then they split up, gets back together, and they're playing a festival in New York, and you live in LA, and and all of the flights have been cancelled or whatever, and you get your friends together, and you pack them in a van, and you drive through the night across the country, 4,400 and something kilometers, and you get to this festival, and you see the show, you buy all the merch, you do all the stuff, you try and figure out how you can get yourself in the lift, with the band and do the same thing. It's fucking irrational because that music has somehow written itself on your heart, It's like this crazy heart feeling around this kind of stuff. And it means that your attachment to that band and to their music and to what it makes you feel and to what it brings back for you and your heart memory of it is nothing to do with money. Yeah. And it's everything to do with the experience. And often when you're talking about selling a product or, how capitalism works, we do this thing, how capitalism works. Just how's that for a massive fucking statement? Just throw out there how capitalism works. No, what you're doing is this kind of pros and cons kind of way of deciding about buying a product. What are the benefits and how much does it cost and all this kind of thing, and tell me, and what do you offer versus what this person offers and all this sort of stuff, which we naturally do as humans 20 times a day when we're making all sorts of decisions about stuff, and which is all well and good, which is fine. It was a great decision-making process. But when you're a fan of something, it's a whole fucking other game. It's a completely different thing. You're talking about how a thing makes you feel. You're talking about how when you're a fan of a band, for example, or you're a fan of I don't know, whatever. I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I'm into fly fishing, in a big way. And like you become a fan of a company who makes a certain thing, and there's a guy working in a shed milling a piece of aluminium to make a part for a reel somewhere. And the cost of it and the hassle of getting it is completely ridiculous. There's no point in this thing. It's too heavy. It doesn't even do its job very well. It's too expensive. The dude who makes it never replies to emails. You've got to send him a postcard, with a reference to a carrier pigeon that's going to bring a thing to do a thing, like all this sort of stuff. But there's something about being a fan of someone's story and what they do that makes you just say, I have to have this part to put on this reel. It's essential to me. And then, when someone's like, how much did that cost you? You're just like, it doesn't matter. Don't ask me. Stop, remind me. Stop talking about, I'm just, you for some reason, you have built this connection to this person, to this product, to this thing, which is like a heart connection, which is a fan connection, which is the complete opposite of just the pros and cons of regular economic decision making,
Yeah.
And I think the way the fan economy works is that, like, you can, as an artist, as a visual artist, as someone who documents people in love, like, you can either set yourself up to be someone who is just we offer this service, we do this thing, and you make the decision about us based on the pros and cons of, like, whatever way you want to distill the quality of the work and what the package looks like and what the cost is, or like most artists, you build fans. You make work in a certain way that makes people who are like you feel something, and opens up a part of their heart and turns on a part of their heart and turns on a part of their brain and their experience, which just says, holy fuck, I don't know what it is, but that's a bit of me. Hell yes. And when the time comes that person has found their other person and they're like, I need this story told, they're just like, that's the person for me to do it. That's the work that I want it to look like. That's how it should be. And that, when you've made that connection with someone, that person isn't like, how much does it cost? That person is just like, can you be here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get here. Whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. Just get here, and it's a completely different, and some people, it would be easy for someone to go like, yeah, get here at any cost. No, cost not even in it. It's not even a thing of like, this is a way. It's not like this is a method to charge more money. No, it's just like, it's just a completely different thing. It's a completely different way of making work for someone who is a huge fan of what you do, because it's just like, hey, do whatever you want, do your thing, just come and be and do and make the stuff. Be in the room when the things happen. It's like, it's everything to do with access. It's everything to do with being given the respect to do whatever you need. It's everything to do with, it is a little bit to do with budget, but it's all of these things which are the beautiful irrationality of fans, which means that you can make great work,
Yeah. If someone's listening to the podcast and they're thinking, I want my tribe out there to be fans, if they've got some passive followers or people who are just interested in the work, how can they convert them, or how do they find people who are going to be their fans and have that irrational mindset?
Man, here's the gig, right? If you're making faddish generic work that could be made by anyone, then you're never going to get fans. It's like the difference in a fan economy is between, for example, listening to David Bowie's like Let's Dance, on the 12-inch recording, preferably at half speed, which is kind of real creepy, or listening to fucking generic elevator music, in like a high rise as you're going up in a mall. Like, that's the complete difference between work that someone can be a fan of and work that is just who knows who the fuck made that and who cares, and you'll never remember it again in your life. And if you want to make fans, you have to make work that people can be fans of. That is the bottom line. And it can be quite a harsh reality of looking at your work to go, could I be a fan of this? Is this something I could be obsessive about? And more often than not, the answer is no. And the heaps of that is because of what you're feeding yourself, of who you're hanging around, of what you're aspiring after, of the stuff that you're chasing, of what you think success looks like. If you make work like other people make, because it looks like other people are getting heaps of work. You make work that you see that you looks like what you've seen on blogs, because you're just like, that's the work that people get hired to make. All these kind of things. It's all of the things of figuring out the long, slow journey of the kind of work that you and only you can make, which comes out of not just what you're feeding yourself visually and the sort of person you are, but it comes out of like the journey that you take, of the people who are around you, of having friends who just are like, hey, you were making great work a year ago and turned to shit. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like everyone needs a friend like that, or preferably 3 or maybe 7, always odd numbers. But yeah, like that's the bottom line. If you want people to be fans of your work, you have to make work that someone can be a fan of. And it's really helpful to like move away from whatever discipline you're in, which for us is the visual thing. For me, it's taking photographs. For you guys, making films, and just look at a different genre, look at a different discipline. Look at something where you can really plainly see the difference between generic bullshit and something that's just absurdly absurdly obsessive, that you can be like, holy fuck, this is off the chart. It's the difference between generic pop music and something that's crazy, and it doesn't have to be super popular. It doesn't have to be have a think. I mean, everyone's had an experience with seeing a band or an artist on a small stage at a festival, or stumbling on them. Everyone's got your story of stumbling on them in a weird club when you're on the road somewhere, and you decide to go to a show, and you walk into a room and there's no one in there. And this happened to like me in London like a bunch of years ago. I think we were there shooting, and we had like a crazy busy bunch of shoots like in the UK, and we were camped out like in a weird, just within sight of like the what's the Arsenal Stadium, the Emirates or something, like Arsenal, terrible team. I hate football anyway, but I especially hate Arsenal. And isn't that what you do? That's what you do, right? Yeah. And it was just, we just had to get out of this tiny little apartment. And like Sophie and I went down the road, and like as we were walking down the road, like looking to get something to eat or whatever, and just like breathing in the horrifically not clean air of that part of London, scrolling through like an event finder I've just found on my phone, and it's just like, whoa, it's like Sharon Van Etten's playing in this like place that's right here that we're at the front of. What the fuck? And I just got having been in the music industry, I just got been sent a comp copy of Epic, of like one of her first kind of like, not really a record, it's like an EP, I guess, with a couple of tracks. And I've been like, whoa, this shit's amazing. This is probably like 2010 or something.
Mm-hmm, okay.
And then we just basically like turned right into the venue, paid like £5, go down some stairs, and here's Sharon Van Etten with her band ripping up that EP that I just listened to. And she was insane, and there was no one there. And it was like, what just happened? Which then led me on a life, on a journey of, a 10-year journey of being an obsessive fan, having seen her so many times, having been in a great band in New York, and just after we've been signed to like a pretty great label, having Sharon Van Etten come along to a show and stand right down the front, chewing on like a cinnamon toothpick and then handing one up, to the band, and everyone in the band being like, holy fuck, look down, look at the front, it's Sharon Van Etten, like what? To collecting all of her records, to like going out of my way to see her play in all sorts of places, all of these things. And suddenly you're just like, oh, and her music has been the soundtrack of so many road trips and so many, I don't know, so many things, so many dark moments when you suddenly find yourself putting on, or maybe the moments are actually quite light and you put on Sharon Van Etten and they turn dark because, it's kind of her vibe, all this stuff. But that's what turns you into an event. And it starts out with this moment of walking into a place at some stage and having this experience. and it starts you kind of on this journey, as opposed to scrolling through an event and going, tonight I am going to go out and see a band, and I want to know who's going to get me the most bang for buck, who has the most street cred, the most hits, and the most thing. Like a very, very different experience, which would start you on an entirely different thing. I don't even know what I'm rambling about now, but that's the thing. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, how do I become how do I get fans? Like it's natural to think of someone who's got a huge profile. It's natural to think of someone who's got it going on, who's got a bunch of hits, who's like, but it's not. It's about someone who discovers your work and just goes, holy fuck, like that woke me up. That just woke my heart up. That shook me awake. That was amazing. I don't care. I would have the same experience if there was 10,000 people into this person or just one person. It doesn't really matter. It's like that's a bit of me. That feels amazing. Yeah, that's the experience. But I think that's the gig. It's like you have to have an honest conversation with yourself to be like, if you want people to be fans of your work, you have to make work that they can be fans of.
Yeah.
And that is not, like, in our game, that is not a lot of work. There's not a lot of people's work that you can look at in the wedding game and go, I know who that is. I know who made that. Which is not to say there's not a lot of good work. There's a lot of incredible work. The production values get higher and higher year in and year out. The execution gets higher and higher. The tech that people are using gets better and better. Everything gets better. Everything looks better. It looks just constantly is improving, and the look of it, and the production values of it are incredible. But there is very little stuff where the story is amazing, where you just go, holy shit! Like look at that. It's like you guys are filmmakers, It's like Roger Deakins, Like you look at how Deakins uses light, You could look at a scene that was lit by Deakins and shot by Deakins, whether it was on an iPhone or on a fucking RE, and you'll be like, Deakins, hello, all day long.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. You can be a fan of that guy because he has a look, he has a thing that he does, he has a way of doing it. Whether you're a fan of Lynch or not, you can appreciate Lynch because you're just like, what the fuck? What? If you're watching a thing and you find yourself going, sorry, what? You're like, oh, it must be David Lynch.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with there's so many visual artists, there's so many photographers, there's so many whose fingerprint, whose signature is as distinctive as hearing Bowie's voice come out your speakers. But there isn't a lot. I mean, just to be bold, there isn't a lot of that in the wedding game because like it does often reward or not reward. But there's a lot of generic stuff where it's beautiful, but you don't know who made it. And it's very hard to be a fan of something which is the same as everything else. It's very hard to be a fan of. I'm a big fan of potato chips, of crisps, very big fan, but only of certain flavors and certain. The crunch has to be right, the thickness, everything about this is right. And there's a fuck ton of potato chips on the market. You go into the supermarket to buy potato chips, and I'm just straight to. There's only two kinds that I'll buy, straight to those, and there's about 300 different kinds in there. It's just like no one wants any of these. Take them off the shelf, remove them immediately. Over here, these are the ones that I can be a fan of,
And what are the ones? What are the ones? Okay, well, listen, if you're prepared to go deep. So so in the States, Trader Joe's, familiar? Yes.
Trader Joe's, right? Trader Joe's make a salt and pepper chip, which is spicy, yes, comes in a very, very, very typical American, very large bag. Which is appealing because obviously you can't close the bag. You're eating the whole fucking pack of chips. But they are so crunchy that you will damage your mouth. Like they're so thick and shards of them are the crunch is so intense that you will hurt yourself. It's like you're teetering carefully balanced on the very edge of like a glacier as it like buckles with like crazy sharp ridiculous ice, and that this is exhilarating but also death awaits. That's what eating those chips is like. Now friends of ours in the States used to send me those bags of those chips, like someone's prepared to spend $50 to ship you a $3 bag of chips. They love you.
Wow.
Now just recently here in this nation, Aotearoa, New Zealand, someone has begun to make a chip that has the same potential for pain as the Trader Joe's. It's called Snack-a-Changy.
Snack-a-Changy.
Snack-a-Changy. Snack-a-Changy.
Okay.
Snack-a-Changy. There you go. Hot tip. Also, Proper Crisps. Another great local New Zealand chip maker. Not quite as brutally crunchy, but very delicious. I can be a fan of the Proper Crisp, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Listen, here's the thing based on crisps, because I'm a big fan of the Proper Crisp. Salt and vinegar, of course.
Classic.
Always.
Classic.
Yeah.
Well, they call it dill pickle and vinegar, but let's be honest, it's just like it's salt and vinegar, people.
Yeah.
You can see a stranger with a packet of dill pickle and vinegar Proper Crisps in the street, and you can walk up to them and be like, "Now that is a great chip," and they will immediately be like, "Yes, it is. Do you want one? Also, tell me all about it." You know, like that's when you know you're a fan. When you find someone else who's a fan of the same thing, that's when you just go, "Holy fuck!" Like the Venn diagram of fandom has brought us together.
That's a special bond right there.
It's a special moment.
Definitely.
It's a special moment in the street, you know.
I'm gonna do a Q&A reminder to our Clubhouse listeners. Thank you for joining us live. You can listen to this Q&A again if you are a member of our Patreon, which is patreon.com/perspective by Cinemate. And you can get access to all the Q&As and everything that we do for every podcast. There is another sponsor of the show. So Greg, should we just hit that button? With Jack was designed from the ground up and is tailored specifically for creatives. Whether you provide a service like design, development or photography, or offer advice to clients, With Jack is for you. It's focused on creatives. Insurance shouldn't be complicated, so With Jack has made every step easy. You'll deal with one form and talk to one Jack as you sign up, get covered, and move on with your day. With Jack is all about bespoke insurance for creatives. Simple. That doesn't mean more forms or faff, it means less. It's not about endless features and stale service. It's about one solid policy and the personal touch. Bye-bye unnecessary fuss. Hello, creative friendly insurance. Be a confident creative. And we're back. Thank you very much for that.
Be a confident creative, guys.
Yeah. Wait, no, it's funny. Like that is we call it a sponsorship read, but that's just our friend Ashley's company. She doesn't give us any money for this, but the way that she talks about insurance is unreal. Like, I'm not even kidding. Yeah, I want to get talking more about photography. I want to talk about influences, about shooting authentically. In fact, let's start with that, because it is, like you said, it's really hard to be authentic in a world that just blasts you with so much images.
I'm just going to jump in, actually. If I remember right, I think it was way up north in Cannes, someone told us a story, and I think it was you they were talking about. Someone stood up and said something about who in the room has been to all the museums in Cannes while they're here for this event, and nobody in the room had put their hand up. And was that you that said that?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Well, that came from like probably a year before being in New York, and what was her name? Janet. I can't remember. Mental blank. This is what happens when you get older. I can't even think of like what her.
Put them on.
So legendary. Obviously not that legendary. No, legendary like Berkeley University, like fine art photography like lecturer. And she had been like back in the day, like she was in like in the sort of late 60s-ish, early 70s. She had been in San Fran shooting everything on a Rolly, which is why I sort of found her work, was shooting squares on film. And she had a friend who worked for like some big courier company, and they needed someone who was broke to take like documents to New York on a flight, wait around for the return flight, and come home. So she would fly into New York, bring a sheaf of documents, and then she'd have like 3 or 4 hours up her sleeve, and she would. And this is when New York was like broken down, broken as fuck, like horrific, like washed up city, not the gentrified, like cleaned up piece of crap that it is now, but it was like shit was going on,
Yeah.
And she would just like shoot like a bunch of rolls in those few hours and then fly back to San Fran, and go back to being a student. And she did it like every week for ages. And so she has this beautiful document of New York from this time when it was just like just remarkable, all shot on color film, and it's glorious. And so she was at this, our friend who runs this workshop was like, hey, who should I get? Like, is there someone that no one will know that I can get? And I was like, oh, can you track down this woman for me? Like, I'm obsessed with her. And like Ryan tracked her down, got her to come onto the thing, and she's like a genius. She actually we were in the green room, and she came up to me. She's like, I understand you very really beautiful, like older. She's probably like late 60s. I understand you are the reason why I'm here. I'd like you to have a copy of my book, and I'm dying. And so I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, she's like, do you want me to write a message in the front of it? I was like, yes, please. She's like, what do you want me to write? I'm like, can you write that I'm your greatest inspiration? And so she wrote it at the front of this book, which I've still got in our bookshelf, which I open. But then every time I show it to someone, I obviously have to do it as kind of to be like, I made her write that because clearly I'm not her greatest inspiration, just in case. Like, that's kind of just, yeah. But then you've destroyed the gag already. But no, she was at, this is all just to say that I didn't invent this little thing because it was like, I was so blown away by when she did this. She finished off her talk at this workshop, and she said, we're in New York, and she's like, oh, well, I've got one extra day here, and she was just like, who's been to see, she's like, who's been to see the Diane Arbus retrospective, like, at the Met Brow, who's gone to this gallery, who's gone to see this work, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go and meet this person who I've never met before, who's like a legendary artist, but I've like annoyed them for like 3 months to be able to go and have a coffee with them, and then I'm going to be doing this, and I'm going to this gallery, and I'm doing this thing, and these are all things that are on, and I'm putting all of this remarkable input in me, and it just left me going like, holy shit, like I thought I'd been good by going to 2 exhibitions, but it was just like, wow, like she's insatiable. She's taken this opportunity to see some fresh stuff and see some new stuff. And so when we were in Cannes, like I remember like just being in the green room and all of the people who were speaking were talking about, holy, like on the Riviera, there are some insane museums. There's some incredible art history. There's some pretty incredible stuff to go see. And it was just like, all these people have flown from around Europe to come to this place, and they're sitting in a darkened room, forced to listen to me, and you're just like, hey, after this is done, like, who's like hitting this thing up? And I actually stupidly honestly thought that maybe it wouldn't be as dead as it was, but it was dead as fuck. It was just like no one. I was like, oh my goodness. And I just started listing museums and listing things. Who's been here? You've been here for a week. Who's been to these places? Who's done this stuff? Yeah. And it was just like, this, like, you don't need to just absorb what comes off the stage. Like you can go out into the world here and do this thing. But yeah, all of that to just say, it illustrates the thing that it's we often don't take control of our creative diet for ourselves.
Yeah.
We take whatever flows down, whatever we're scrolling through, whatever flows down the line to us, whatever comes down the tap of here's what everyone's looking at, as opposed to, don't get me started on creative diet, like you are what you eat. Holy fuck, you are absolutely what you eat. Like you put out, your output is a worse version of what you put in. Like there's so many, like if you don't like your output, change your input. So many bloody little phrases and things that we can throw out, but they're all absolutely deathly true. That you are, you are just a result of what you feed yourself and what you put into yourself. And the sooner you take control of that, the sooner you get a better result. The sooner you get a result which is more you. The sooner you start like we're talking about fan work. The sooner you start making work that that someone can be a fan of. Like the sooner you start figuring out the very unique combination of all of the things that you're putting into yourself visually and but not just visually, but like if you're a photographer, yes, photography, but like looking at films and looking at light and listening to music and the kind of friends you have and the things that you're talking about and issues that you're talking about and understanding how people's hearts work and watching people in love and seeing how they are and how they operate and seeing the different kinds of it and being a student of human beings in a beautiful way. Like all of these things, if you put them into you, in a very deliberate, measured way, you will get a result in your work, in your art, and how you operate and what you do, which will see you making work that no one fucking else can make. And if you're making something that no one else can make, I guarantee you're making work that someone can be an obsessive fan of. That is the opposite of generic. And so all it really takes is for you to start to monitor and understand your creative diet.
Yeah. That actually. No, I was just going to say that actually ties in quite nicely to what I was going to ask you, because you once said, and I can't even remember where, that might be on your blog, get calibrated, feed yourself, nudge your dials, look at why you think and feel and love the things you do, because inspiration is far too important to be put in the hands of an algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
I just when I saw that, I was like, I have to read that out to people, because you can be told these things, but sometimes, you kind of just need to put it into action to change your creative diet, to, even just discover new shit. I love discovering new shit, and it's like tying it back into music, it's like, oh, they don't release any good music anymore. Like, well, that's what you're only saying that because you were connected to, the genre of music that, you were having your big life moments to. But like, you can have that feeling again to music if you just go out and discover music with moments. And yeah. But
quick dial back. The Janet I was talking about, Janet Delaney, it just took me ages to like, you're sitting here going through A, B, C, D. Janet Delaney, her work. Yeah, you need to see, when you see her work, you understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, like the thing of the thing of leaving your diet up to someone else is absurd. But it's what we all do. Like the amount of what is it? It's like your average human being gets something like 20,000 visual messages a day, like from the digital devices. That's a fuck ton of visual messages, and I guarantee that you hardly decided on any of them. That they were all fed for you and given to you and passed down to you. But it's the thing of like you are like you think like you think, and you are like you are. Not by accident, but by a whole bunch of things that have been fed into you, by the records that your parents love to listen to, by the belief system that you grew up in, by the culture that you grew up in, by the neighborhood where you are, by all of these things. And they're all accidental things that have had this massive effect on you.
Yeah.
And some of us like who we are and some of us don't. But either way, it's just been a deliberate bunch of inputs that have made you think like you think and want to make the work that you want to make, But at some stage you realize that it stops being accidental and you take charge of it, you take control of it. Like you might have wanted to be a photographer because like your uncle had like a photo book of something of Sebastião of Salgado that sat on his his dining room table that he let you look at every time you went over to his place, and that might be the thing. Well, you just figure out that was the thing, so then start feeding yourself a diet of Salgado, start feeding yourself a diet of something else. Sometimes I think the easiest thing to do with understanding how your creative diet works, because you hear these tropes, these big phrases like, if you don't like your input, change your, if you don't like your output, change your input, what you eat. And you're just like, cool. You're still faced with like the immense avalanche of content that you have to look at every day. Not have to look at, but that you are looking at. That you're the monster of the internet stands over you with a whip and says, "Look at this." No, but you not. But it's in fact the easiest way to get a read on it. The easiest thing to do is, rather than try and figure out what to feed yourself, is to just stop the flow and feed yourself one thing. Like stop the fucking flow, go by yourself. If you're a photographer, this is what I love doing. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying this is the thing. Like just do one action for a month. Go buy yourself a photo book. like something classic that you love. Stephen Shaw's Uncommon Places, personal fave, you know? And deliberately have that be your visual inspiration for a month. Work your way through that book until you're so sick of it, until you can't even look at it anymore, and you kind of break through and suddenly see a whole bunch of other stuff. See whatever your time is in the day before your mind gets cluttered. It might be, for me, it's the morning. You know, don't look at any screens in the morning. Get up early, sit with your coffee, and look through this book carve out 20 minutes. You know, before your kids wake up or before whatever, or, you know, whatever. There's a window somewhere. There is, you know.
Yeah.
And it might be 10 minutes, it might be 7 minutes, it might be half an hour, who knows. But just give yourself that one thing and decide that all the other stuff that you're seeing through the day is just whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. It might be communication. It might be, you know, use Instagram to just message the people that you communicate with if you want, and just ignore the shit that scrolls down through the thing. But just give yourself this one book every day for 20 minutes, say, for a month, and see what happens to your work.
Yeah.
And I promise you that you will suddenly go, holy fuck. It's like you've told yourself, you know, like, who doesn't want abs? You know, it's like you've told yourself, like, oh, I want, you know, like, I'd love to get abs, but I'm never going to get abs. And then someone is just, you get a personal trainer who says, I will do 100 crunches with you every morning for the next month, and we will only eat this. And you're like, oh, okay. And then at the end of the month, you're like, holy fuck, I've got abs. What happened? It's like, well, you did this, you dipshit, you know, obviously. And so, you know, and so it's just like, and so once you discover that, you're like, wait a sec, if I did that for a month and got this, what if I did more? What's the next book? How, you know, something you find your work doing a certain thing, and it's just based on how you calibrate yourself, how you see light. I mean, I get infuriated when in a kind way, you know, obviously, but still fucking infuriated. Like when people are like, they've got a question for you at in a Q&A or at a workshop or whatever thing that you're doing, and they ask you about post-production. And they're like, oh, how do you know, tell me about post. How do I get my stuff to look like this? And you're just like, well, it's nothing to do with like post, and it's everything to do with how you see light, or how you use light, or how you see people, you know, how you understand how moments work, how you shoot this thing, how ready and prepared you are for this or for that, or for, you know, it's like, it's just nothing to do with the final 1% of output of the art making process, and it's everything to do with the other 99% of the input, you know, of how you've designed yourself, of how you see stuff, of how you work and use light. Storing that, like when I first started shooting like film, like, you know, I scored this, went around to music days, went around to this friend's place who had an amp for me, you know, and we'd go out into his garage. He's got this crazy old vintage amp. It's like, oh, you know, take that, cool. And then sitting like up on the shelf in the garage next to it was this old like fucking rolly cord, and this old leather thing. He's like, oh, you're into cameras, like have that too. I was like, oh, okay, sweet. What is it, you know? And then started shooting like, you know, heaps of medium format film. Didn't have a light meter. And so you just learn Sunny 16. And because I'm an idiot, I don't go too deep in Sunny 16. I'm just still at the 16 level, you know, which is just shooting in full sun, right? And the lenses on that Rolly are really low contrast. So if you want to see like dark shadows, you've kind of got to be like, you've got to go find ruthless light with really dark shadows. Now the beauty of being in New Zealand is that our light is fucking like ruthless, you know. So no problems there. And so I suddenly start shooting medium format stuff, like, and shooting in a certain light that I can meter for because I'm stupid, and don't have a meter and can't figure out Sunny 16. So only shooting brutal light and shooting it only where I see hard shadows, because I love like the shadow contrast, and the rolling lenses need brutal light to get nice looking dark shadows. And I just start learning to shoot this stuff on this camera. And it's only because of that harsh light vibe that suddenly you start shooting the same light. You start seeing light in the same way, and shooting it digitally, and then you start doing it on a wedding day with couples, with people, and it turns into a look. And before you know it, you feed yourself this diet and this practice of doing a thing a certain way for whatever reason. For me, it was just because I could only meter a certain way, so it only looked for a certain light. And then suddenly you start seeing that light everywhere and operating in that way that you see, and that you use the light in the same way. And suddenly it's just like, I'm fucking lost when the light's beautiful, Southern California, LA, even as fuck everywhere. I'm like, shit, I need some ruthless punch you in the face light, please. Like, this shit's not working for me. But it's the same thing. You feed yourself a certain thing. Before you know it, it affects how you see people, how you see light, how you see and understand like this kind of stuff. It's like the thing of understanding, like you would think that people who document people in love, people like us, have an incredible understanding of how lovers work, of how a touch works, of how communication works, of what are the moments that melt people, of what are the moments when they drop the connection you're trying to create and they get their own connection. It's so different for everyone, but you think that we get really, really good at understanding the cues of lovers and of how hearts work, and how that comes out in certain moments in time, under pressure or when they're left alone. But so many people in our industry have no fucking idea how lovers work. It's mental. It's insane. And, if there's one skill that you should have, it's understanding how people in love operate and touch each other and walk towards each other and see each other across the room when it's all batshit crazy. Because that's if you're paying attention to that, then suddenly you're shooting the stuff which they look back at and they go, that's you. That's us. You saw us. You see us as well. Like, that's the us that we thought was invisible to everyone else, That's the same kind of thing. So you feed yourself a diet of lovers. You feed yourself a diet of, like, seeing how people in love work and of watching old people in love, at a wedding, grandparents who are, like, snuggling up. Of watching this stuff, of being like, that's how it works. Because this is what you do, you document people having this love experience, in front of a whole bunch of other people. In the same way that, like, I became obsessed with a certain kind of light and it started to show up in all of our other work, The same way that I became with that roller, like the beauty of doing multiple exposures on a weird old camera. And I suddenly became obsessed with, like, how textures and layers work. And what works and what doesn't work, because you're just fumbling around, feeding yourself the same thing over and over, trying to figure it out. And it gets inside you and into you. And it starts to come out in all sorts of different ways, like sitting with a bloody, Salgado's Genesis book every morning for 20 minutes for a month until you're so completely sick of seeing black and white photos of penguins in Antarctica. But you suddenly go outside and you see black. You see black in a way that you haven't seen black before, because the blacks of how he shoots tri-X and that crazy fucking it's all, it gets inside you. And the easiest way to do it is, rather than thinking, what's my diet going to be today? Like, if you sat down and said, like, I'm going to actually eat healthily, just food. Like, if you've got a terrible diet, I'm going to eat healthily, and someone, like, whips you up. Okay, we're going to take you from eating fish and chips and fucking deep fried Glasgow pizza and, crisps and drinking cans of whatever, lager. We're going to take you to this. We've got a whole bunch of, like, raw food over here. You've gone full vegan. You just honestly die. You just die. But if someone said to you, listen, here's what we need to do so that you don't have a heart attack. We're going to cut out the crisps. I'd be heartbroken. But also, you just go, okay, rather than doing this whole other new thing here, I'll just stop that. And I'll just see what happens, It's easier to kind of cut shit out than it is to put stuff in. It's easier to stop scrolling, to think, when do I spend my time? When's my screen time thing on my phone? What does it say? When do I spend my time doing it? Oh, cool. I lie in bed when I wake up in the morning and I scroll through the glory of Instagram, No. What I'll do is I won't do that, and I'll put a different thing in me instead. It's you just figure out how you can work your diet.
Yeah. I love that.
Talking about your work, what's your post-production workflow? Nah, I'm all joking. No,
Greg.
Actual question. How do you think your background in shooting film and using that Rolly camera and shooting in Analogue, how do you think that's helped your art?
Oh, like enormously. Like, like we talk about analog processes, analog mindset kind of stuff, and I think it's not, there's nothing magic about the medium. There's nothing magic about film, Well, actually there's a fuck ton of magic about it, but I mean, it's not like, holy shit, you can shoot this thing digitally and then shoot this thing on film. It's like, whoa, film's amazing. It's like, no, it's not. It's just fucking, it's just another tool. But there's a bunch of things about, how analog works, which travel alongside art in a really beautiful way. Mm-hmm. And some of those things like constraint, which is such an obvious thing. Like you've got a roll of, like in the roll, you've got 12 shots on roll, and whatever speed you've got loaded into the camera is the speed you're stuck with until you fucking finish that roll.
Yeah.
And the thing operates in a certain way. There's all these levels of constraint which actually work really beautifully. Like that's how art works. Art is constraint. Art is saying, rather than you can have all the possibility in the world, which cripples most people, it's just like, okay, here's the constraints. Talk to any architect, about the first questions they ask when a client comes to them to say, hey, I want to build a site, and then want to build a house. They're just like, tell me about the site. What can't we do? Tell me what we can't do so we can figure out what we can do. Constraint is this beautiful thing. I often talk about constraint with regards to like the idea of sort of firecrackers versus bullets. You take a little handful of gunpowder, put it on the table and light it, and it just will make smoke, make a little flash and some smoke. No big deal, boring. Wrap it up in paper or cardboard, but paper, pretty tight. Put a fuse in the end. You got a firecracker, which is a fuck ton more fun than just a pile of smoke, But if you wrap the gunpowder in brass and put a hunk of lead in the end, you've got a bullet which can fucking change the world and change history and destroy lives or save people or bring freedom or bring whatever, oppression, or like you've got this insanely powerful thing. And the only difference between a handful of gunpowder on the table that just makes a bunch of smoke that's nothing and someone waging war is constraint, constraining that power to do a certain thing. And as an artist, it's very natural to think that constraint, people telling you here's the limits, a client says here's the limits, that's bad for your art. No, it's fucking fantastic for your art. It does constraint is everything.
Yeah.
The analog world is entirely about constraint, and the art world is entirely about constraint. These two things go together like in a really beautiful, incredible synergy. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. There's so many kind of like analog things that run alongside art, like in a beautiful way. But I mean, the constraint is definitely like a key one that just people come back to again and again. And often when they're talking about what they love about, about say shooting film, when they talk about, oh, I love this or I love that or blah blah blah, they're actually talking about constraint. You can boil it down and go, oh, what you love is you love some of the options being taken away from you. That's what you love. It actually makes it easier,
And that's, I mean, so you're like earlier you were going to ask me more about film, and that what you've just said is why I found the joy of shooting film, and especially black and white. Actually, just taking the color right out of it, you see things totally differently, and like what may have been fearful to take images of, suddenly the fear is no longer there, which sounds kind of weird, like there's so much equipment, you can get the best images, but there's just so much of it, so much equipment, so many voices telling you what to do, what not to do. Like, you end up shooting with a really expensive camera with you have endless supply of lenses you can shoot with. It's like the paradox of choice that I was talking about, like that, and this came up. It came up last week with Jai, talking about the paradox of choice, where you think you have all these things at your fingertips, that all that choice is going to make you really happy, but in actual fact, I would shoot with like a 35, and then I'd be like, oh, Greg, I should have used my 24. Should have gone that, or I should have done this, should have done that. And even in post, like not even being present, even after I've taken the shot, I am unhappy with what I've gotten just because I might have made the wrong choice or whatever. You don't get that with film, especially when it's just my Nikon F3 and my 50mm lens and my black and white film. That's it.
It's definitely this. I mean, people always ask, like, how do I tell better stories at a wedding? How do I tell a story better? It's just like, I don't know. Take one lens.
Yeah.
stop thinking about your fucking camera and start thinking about the people in front of you. Like that would be a good start.
Yeah.
But it's yes, the tool. I mean, the tools are really important. Like making a good choice of the tools is a certain thing. But like back to that thing, like of you should be able to, like, if you can see the story and if you understand people and you have a good understanding of your tools, you could shoot this stuff on an iPhone and tell a beautiful story. Which feels a bit cliche to say, but you honestly could. Like, the stories in you, the skill sets in you, the understanding of people and the understanding of light is in you. There's no magic in your camera. There's no magic in the system that you're using. You have to find. I mean, people are always like, what about this gear? What about this thing? And Soph and I have, we are Canon users and we have represented Canon, as ambassadors heaps, and we've talked about their new gear and especially with the R series stuff, which is still wonderful. Mm-hmm. People are always about, what's your upgrade thing, and all this stuff. It's just like, I don't really care that much. Like, I have a couple of old lenses that I really love, and I'm glad that people get rid of them because I can acquire more and more of them. The same thing again. But it's kind of, it's less about that and more about, like, if you still, you'll know when you find the tools that work for you. So if you're still searching and trying to scratch that itch, then just keep searching until you find a system that works for you. But if you feel really happy with the storytelling, if you see the story now and not the gear, then perfect. Then just stop with that. Don't feel like you have to upgrade anything until you break it. It's just this thing of being like, see the story. Don't see you trying to tell the story. Don't see the storyteller. See it. I mean, I even hate the word storyteller. Ugh, the overuse of the word story. But there's no other thing. There's no other word for it, alas, yet. But it's, you see the people in front of you, and whatever it takes, however much gear you have to slowly leave behind until you start to see them and you stop thinking about gear choices, then you're away.
Yeah.
And like I remember like being at a Q&A, Aaron Huey, legendary, like New York Times / Nat Geo photographer, does crazy longitudinal, 7-year longitudinal stories on, like alcoholism and suicide in Navajo communities in the States, for example, and this Q&A, and someone asked him, like, this young dude asked him, the last after an incredible presentation, the last question, the last time he's going to speak before we're done, and everyone's hanging on every word. And this dude puts his hand up, like, what gear? This is the classic wedding photographer gear question. What gear do you use? and very, very graciously, he was like, when you could hear a bunch of us just like sighing it, like, oh, what? That's the question. He was just like, well, he's like, if it's like a fast thing that you've got to shoot, I'll take 2 bodies and a bunch of lenses and I'll do this thing, just answering the kid's question, just being a nice guy. Mm-hmm. But then his gear changes, just like, but if it's important, if the story is really fucking important, I'll just take 1 body and a 35mm lens because, like, if the story's important, the tricks can just fuck off. And it was just like, whoa, mic drop. Like, but that is completely the thing. Like, so many things in your camera bag are just tricks that you use when you haven't got a story in front of you. They're tricks that you use when you're trying to do something and make something look better than it is. And the easiest way to, when there's a room full of humans in front of you, there is no shortage of stories in front of you. Often the reason why your bag's full of tricks, the reason why you think you need a bag full of tricks is because you've just stopped looking at the people. You've just stopped looking. All you have to do is look closer, is have less shit in your bag that when you think, wow, I've got no options here. I can't see anything going on. I can't see whatever. I can't see what, the first thing you do is like, oh, well, maybe I need a different thing. Maybe I need a different lens. Maybe I need a whatever. Maybe I need to do something tricky. It's like, no, you just need to learn how people work. You need to forget about being a photographer and be a fucking great human, There's no doubt that the more you lighten your bag, the better stories you will tell. There's no doubt in my mind. And just slowly leave a thing behind, bit by bit, until you're taking not much stuff to a shoot and you'll suddenly start to see the world, like through a 50mm lens, or you'll see the world like in a certain way or in a certain kind of thing. You just understand what your gear is and what it does really well and what it doesn't do really well. You understand the light that it works really well for. You understand when you see the stuff in front of you that you go, holy fuck, this is it. Like good mate, dear friend, Jonas Peterson, like, legendary dude. Like I remember him saying to us, we're out running around somewhere, and like he was just like, the light changed in this way. It wasn't on a shoot. I don't know what we were doing, but the light changed to be like this crazy dark background with like a slice of light, like right in front of it, lighting up something. And he was just like, "Oh, it's in his Swedish accent. Oh, it's my light. This is my light." I was like, "Your light? What do you mean your light?" And he was just like, doesn't talk much often, Jonas, but the salient point where he was just like, you don't need to know. You don't need to know much in this game. You just need to know what your light is, and when it shows up, And so it doesn't matter that like 300 different kinds of light aren't your light and you don't know how to use it. You just need to know what your light is, so that when you look into a room and see it, you're just like, I know what to do with this. I know how to find this. And the more you look for your light, the more you'll find it everywhere you fucking look. The more you'll be like, whoa, my light's everywhere actually. I can figure out how to use this in a certain way in a certain place. I can figure out how to find a cut-out slice of ruthless light somewhere. I can figure out how to find, like light falling across. I mean, I shoot heaps of stuff which comes from shooting stuff on the Rolly, which is like someone lit across the front of them, or lit, like the classic Rembrandt eye triangle kind of thing, where the background falls away to darkness. And the reason why I started shooting that stuff is because when I'm doing multiple exposures, I want to keep some of the negative unexposed, so you can put another layer on, right? So you're always looking to get separation. But then what you start to learn, like with doing that and doing it digitally as well, when you're not shooting film, you start to learn that you can find that light everywhere, that you can get this beautiful isolation everywhere. Even if the background's messy as fuck and impossible, you can get this beautiful isolation that makes it disappear. And you make a person who to your human eyes is in the middle of a messy whatever, you turn them into this beautiful, elegant, being who has got poise and grace and, in the middle of nothing, in the middle of a blackness or whatever, and you can find that light everywhere. And the more you look at that, how that light works to understand, I'm talking about understanding your light, whatever your thing is, the more I've realized, like people are really that's complex light. That's complex light that falls away into nothing, that you can move an inch forward or an inch backwards and the light's change dramatically, that it's all of these flavors of light. We always talk about like light flowing like water, and if you imagine even just window light streaming in, bouncing in like through a window, that light has traveled like from the fucking sun, from the star in the middle of our galaxy, ramped its way through what is that, like 300,000 kilometers away or something like that. It takes 8.5 minutes to get here.
Yeah.
It's a star. It's starlight, and it flows through the window like water, and it sweeps around. There's turbulence everywhere, and you can figure out how to put someone in a certain place in that kind of light that's falling away, that matches who they are and it matches their personality. Like, we're like people, human beings live on the edges of the light, the kind of light which is just like he's right in the middle style, like light someone up on stage. That's celebrity light. Most people aren't like that. They don't like to be and have a fucking spotlight on them. But, people like live in the shadows and at the edges of the shadows and at the edges of the light. And you can get to know someone and find their personality over the course of a day of shooting someone on live. And I can find that flavor of light that's kind of come from a fucking star in the middle of our galaxy and has bounced through a window and is falling away off in a corner to darkness. And you learn who someone is and whereabouts in that light they need to be, that feels like them, that they look at that image and they just go, shit, that's me. Like, you found me.
Yeah.
Like, you saw me, And that's, I don't even know how we got onto that. But that,
it's fucking magic the way you put that, man. Absolutely fucking magic.
Like you said, understanding what you don't need to know how to use every kind of light. You just need to know what your light is and when it shows up.
Yeah.
But
Si, I've just noticed the time. So
yeah, I'm actually late for an eye test. Believe it or not.
Oh, dude! What you should have said.
Oh, I was just having too much fun.
Us too.
So was I, to be honest. I could listen. I could just chat about kind of stuff all day long, and But let's wrap up. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's been so good. Long may you guys reign. This, good fun. And
Appreciate that.
I hope we cross paths in person in the future at some stage.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
In some part of the world somewhere. But if not, Also, to anyone who listens to this, I think the thing to remember is, which I'm always so keen to communicate, is that there is no hierarchy in art. Someone who's got an opinion about it, there's no fucking hierarchy in this. The amount of experience that you've got, the amount of experience you don't have, the amount of how loud your voice is or how quiet it really doesn't matter. It's a level playing field. And I think if you're listening to this stuff and you are brand new to the game, the experiences that you're having right now are some of the most potent ones that you'll ever have. Don't fucking listen to me. Figure it out for yourself. As you go. You should be able to sit around a table with a bunch of people who at all sorts of levels of skill and experience. And I promise you that if you want to get good at this, you will give equal weight to the voices around the table, regardless of how powerful their brand is, or how loud their voice is, or how much experience they have, or the quality of their work. There are so many things to learn from everyone in the room. But the key to that is if we could build an art world, a visual world, whatever in our wedding industry, which ignores the hierarchy, which smashes the fucking hierarchy, we'll learn so much more from each other. We'll figure out so much more. We will make so much better work. Weighting this whole thing like a pyramid, that you climb up, that someone's voice should be listened to more than someone else. It's just so fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the people that I know who have the most experience, who make the greatest work, walk into a room and do their best to seek out someone who's having the craziest experience. And most of the time that means that they're seeking out the person who's just started, who's in the heady days of learning a new skill, with the learning curve every single shoot. They're just holy shit, I just discovered this kind of light. You're just tell me about it. What did you fuck, I need to steal your tricks. I need to be reinvigorated. I need to understand. So if you're listening to this, I'm just another fucking voice of a thing. If you disagree with something, then it's completely fine to disagree with it. I just have a loud voice. That's all it is. But talk about it with other people. Come to your own conclusions. Figure shit out. It's don't let me or anyone else tell you what to think about a thing. Forge ahead and figure out your own opinions and figure out how that stuff works. Sometimes experience is useful because it means that I can tell you, I did this thing. I plunged my hand into a vat of boiling oil, and it turns out that you do not need to do that to find out that you should do it. But other times we're talking about more subtle things like the flavors of crisps. It's go out there and buy all the flavors of crisps and eat them all. I encourage you. Crisps are your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you're here,
and that's exactly sort of why we do this podcast, is to talk to. Well, yeah, Chris, please. No, to talk to other creatives and get their opinions and their, as we call the podcast, perspectives on the industry and everything, and just share that with people to learn from and get inspired by.
Yeah. Sai, where can people find you online?
I've digitized myself into binary, and I am living. Baileymoore.com, which is BAYLYMOORE.com. Is where sort of our world lives online, but on Instagram, Sasmore, SASMOORE is my my sort of analog stuff. Bailey Moore is an Instagram channel for people who love stuff. It's if you seek out one of those two channels, just the website or the Instagram stuff, you'll find your way to everything else that's listed around of things going on.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way. But also. Apparently I'm on Clubhouse now too.
Yeah.
Thanks to you guys. Got tricked into it. My screen time's going to go through the roof. Oh.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. It's totally good.
It's a fun app, so enjoy the conversations that happen. It's a good time. It's a good time. Yeah, and people can find us at cinematefilms.co.uk on Instagram and Facebook, Cinemate Films. We hope you loved this episode, and if you did, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/perspective by Cinemate. As for as little as £1, you can support the podcast, and for the price of a coffee every month, you can get access to the Clubhouse Q&As, round table discussions, and even more bonus content that won't be available anywhere else. If you don't have any money to give, that's totally okay. You are our best friends. Maybe just hit that subscribe button so you know when the next episode goes online, which will be for free, obviously. Maybe just leave a review. That would be very cool. And we'll even give you a shout out on the next episode of the podcast if you do, just to show our love. However,
in the meantime,
enjoy your life.